Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Tech Talk with Ethan. And today I'm here with Becca Kessin, who is a sound designer. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks for having me. So I am a sound designer. I am a theatrical sound designer, which means I design sound for theater shows. And this is a really broad job description. What I am doing on a musical might be very, very different than what I'm doing on a play that doesn't have any live music or microphones. Something I actually really, really love about my job is I'm never doing the same thing twice, like ever. There are always new challenges, and that's a good thing. If you saw the same piece of theater over and over and over, you'd be bored, you'd lose your audience. So I love the variability of what I do and how exciting and varied it keeps things.
Yeah, that sounds, it changes every day, right? For you, it seems like, like you're doing one thing and then you switch to this and it's a lot back and forth.
Yes. And actually, it's back and forth and it's also simultaneously. I know your audience is mostly students. Once you graduate students, you are going to be juggling so many positions at once. I will often be in production for a few, pre-production for a few shows at once. And then, I might have back-to-back tech for 3 or 4 weeks. And that is a part of what being a designer is. And so you're always multitasking, right? So I've got my brain in a musical, and then I've got my brain in a play with lots of Foley sounds. And then I've got my head in another show that might have, improvised music or whatever it is. It's always different. Another great example is I currently teach at Cal State Fullerton. I teach sound within our theater department, Go Titans. We are always working on multiple shows. This season, we actually have 9 shows going up. And we've got an opera, we've got musicals, we've got podcasts. We have a podcast. We have a number of plays, both filmed on a stage and streamed and shot at home. So we are keeping a lot of balls in the air. And when you are a sound designer, you do need to be open to all of these kinds of challenges.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot to balance. Oh, I mean, you're involved with that program, I'm guessing, right? At Fullerton?
Yes. This is my 4th year with Fullerton.
Wow. That's what theater, that's what we do in theater, right? We bounce things, I think, right? That's part of it, at least.
Yeah, we adapt. We make new things. We try new things. Something that I sometimes joke about is when you are the most comfortable with your fellow collaborators, you can really have your best and boldest ideas. Don't be afraid to swing and miss, as it were, when you're talking about creative problem solving and creative ideas in your shows. There are, I don't like the phrase more than one way to skin a cat, but there's lots of ways to design a show and approach creating a piece of theater.
Could you explain how you got into sound or design?
Sure. That's a great question. So it has to go back a little bit further to how I got into theater at all. I am from New York, born and raised, and I was very, very lucky in that I am from a family that liked to go to the theater. And when I was 7, I saw something being performed at the Tonys. I was like, Mom, can we go see that? And she said, yeah. And we went to see City of Angels. And it's an 80s musical. It was not appropriate for an 8-year-old. I'm very glad my mom took me anyway. And in that musical, it was set half in the 40s and half in present day. And the part that was set in the 40s was black and white. Everything about it, the scenery, the costumes, how it was lit, people looked like they were in a black and white film. And I remember being like, Mom, like just tugging on her sleeve and Mom, how did they do that? And that was it. That was theater magic, and me, like that was my vocation. Yeah. Theater, and specifically theater design, chose me. And I knew I wanted to do that. And so I went to SUNY New Paltz, which is a wonderful undergraduate as part of the SUNY system in New York. And I was going to be an actor and a lighting designer. So not an actor,
Yeah.
not good at it. I was like, you know what? I don't enjoy this process and this is not the job for me. And I realized lighting designers had to run way too much cable. I'm being flippant. I love you, lighting designers, but I realized that wasn't my passion. I got into sound for a class project. It was something we barely had the software to work with in the school. This is 2003. And I was using something called SoundForge, which was just single track destructive editing. For those in the know, you don't want to do it that way. And I had this terrible tool and I had this kind of idea. And for this project, I made this kind of lousy sound design for a scene in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. And I didn't think much of it at the time. And then a friend was directing in the Black Box later that term. And she said, hey, you know how to do sound, right? And I said, well, kind of. I'll do your show. Sure. And I got a reputation. Other people realized, oh, hey, she can do sound. She can do sound. I started working on it and I realized it's what I love. It's where my passion lives. It is truly where I feel myself as an artist is through the world of sound.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, see, and you going back to when you said you first started designing and used that program, right? See, I mean, no GarageBand. I mean, was it early stages of GarageBand back then, or was that way before?
This was, but I know I'm dating myself here, but this is well before GarageBand. I have to say, it is absolutely remarkable for those of you, anyone that has a Mac, this is software that came with it. It also came on your iPhone. The fact that you could theoretically edit more audio on this phone than I could with every computer in our terrible computer lab is absolutely remarkable. So the tools are growing exponentially. The fact that really anyone can start to create work as a sound designer is so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of great software out there. Could you talk about some of that software?
There's tons. So there is so much software out there for sound design. It runs the gamut from free to considerably expensive. I firmly believe that students should not be spending money on their software right now, right? You're students. You are theoretically as young and as broke as you're ever going to be. So when I'm teaching basic editing in my classes, we actually focus on working with free software. The two things that I think are really great to jump into and get your feet wet in terms of sound design and composition is GarageBand, which you've mentioned. It's free with any Mac. The other thing that I have my students use is something called Pro Tools First. You might have heard of Pro Tools. It's an industry standard DAW, digital audio workspace, or we sometimes call them DAWs. It's very expensive. If you were to go down the street and go into an editing bay at Netflix, you would have Pro Tools. There is a free version aimed at new artists and students called Pro Tools First. So I tend to use Pro Tools First as an editor, right? If you said, okay, here's my voiceover, help me chop this up and get a clean edit, I'm going to use Pro Tools. When I'm composing, I don't use GarageBand anymore. I do use the paid version of it. I use something called Logic Pro. I think it's an excellent composing tool. Those are the two pieces of software that I work with to create my content the most. There's also a third piece of software that's also free to you Mac users, and it's called Qlab. And Qlab is how we play back our sound cues. This software, I can never shut up about it because this software was such a game changer. It allows us to break up our sound design and get very modular with it. So maybe I was going to make a cue for you that was a storm. I might have rain and thunder and branches moving against a window. Back in the day when I first started, I'd put them all together in Pro Tools, burn it on a CD, bring it to TAC and hope the levels worked. And if my director turned to me and said, I really like that, but can we have less rain and more wind? I'd need to go back into my DAW, edit, hope my new levels work, burn a new CD. I get, working really quickly. Maybe that's an hour. With something like Qlab, I am able to look at each individual component audio file and adjust my levels accordingly. So I can sort of, change the shape of the cue through its levels and how it's presented to the audience as much as the component pieces that make it up. So those are my three big ones: Qlab, Pro Tools, and Logic.
And of course, GarageBand is the basic, and then you go to Logic from that, right? That's the next step up. Okay.
Yes. Yes. As much as I say students should not spend their money on this, and you shouldn't, if you are considering making a purchase, you should know that Logic has a wonderful student educational bundle. And so that's the one that I see a lot of my college students investing in. So check out those .edu discounts, everybody. If you're going to get stuff, do it while you're a student and it's cheaper. But GarageBand is a wonderful tool.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, and that goes for iMovie too, and all those film stuff. But we're talking about audio here, and those are great programs for audio. So thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. Well, and just to add something, I have a lot of students ask me, like, what microphone should I get? What software should I get? Like, what is the best? I have a big budget. What should I do? I am a firm believer in the best tool for the job is the one that you're using correctly. You are much better off taking an inexpensive USB mic. Like, I'm talking to you on a $50 USB mic because my cat stands on my desk and I'm not going to leave it out where a nice mic out where he can knock it over. I have it gain staged properly. I hope it sounds good at your end, right? I know where to set it. I know how to use the tool. I think you're much better off correctly using the tools you have as opposed to going out and buying the shiniest, flashiest thing that you don't really know how to work. You're going to get a better result if you understand how your gear works.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Because if you have the money, right, kind of you want to go big, right? But then it's like the budgeting and is it worth it,
Exactly. And there's no, and trust me, I've never met a sound designer in my life that had a hard time being like, yeah, really spend that extra $10,000 on your budget. Please do. We all can, don't get me wrong. But I think there's a lot more to the intelligence of your system design than just what you spent on it.
Yeah. And would you say like USB mics are better for different projects than others, like recording and guitars and all that?
I would say USB mics are really well used for at-home audio. Right now, we have a number of shows at the university that we can't be in our theaters. No one can right now. It's not safe. And so we have our students recording at home. What we elected to do as a department was we invested in buying over about 24 USB microphones and ring lights and those kinds of setups. And we were able to send them out to our students. I would much rather the simplified interface of a USB mic that I know can't throw you off. If anyone can do it, if you plug a USB mic into your computer and launch Zoom will, find that mic, latch onto it, you're good to go. In terms of professional audio, once you're getting into a studio setting, I don't like USB mics. I like actually going analog signal into probably some sort of digitized source. You're going to get better quality from analog. If I'm doing like a real in-person show, that's what I want. If you're podcasting, if you're at someone's desk, if you're shooting from home for any reason, USB mics tend to work well there.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's, it's the basics and then you go studio and you get more professional and all that.
Exactly.
For sure. What would you say is the hardest part of being a sound designer?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think one of our biggest challenges is how we communicate across various creative teams. Sound design on its own, it's, an art installation or a radio show at best. Sound design for theater is such a unique beast. We are inherently collaborative. There's some of the best sound designs I've ever done. If I took away the rest of the show, they wouldn't really be anything. So I think a crucial challenge early on is how to talk to your director and the rest of your creative collaborative team to really share the ideas that you want to share. There are going to be a lot of directors you work with over your career. Some of them, and I tell, this is sort of Leslie Knope's "Go Find Your Team" speech. Find that group of collaborators you love working with. If you have a posse that you make amazing art with, keep working with them. You're going to develop a shorthand. I've worked with Celebration Theater in West Hollywood for over a decade. And when I work with the directors in that company, we have almost a mental shorthand between one another. And the design, there's a flow to it. There's an ease to it. We're all working together. When I'm working with a new team, it's always a challenge, an exciting challenge, but still a challenge to make sure we are all collaboratively speaking the same language. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the sound. It's about the overall show. And it's about us supporting the director's vision of this show. I think that's a big challenge. That is the biggest creative challenge. We have technical challenges left and right, but I think that's the most universal one that I see students run into.
For sure. See, I mean, that's what we do in theater, right? Is we work together and, we get the show done, we get the job done, right? And that's the whole part of it. And that network, can you talk about networking and how important that is in your career?
Oh, yeah. Networking is crucial. Your name and your reputation is essentially a stand-in for you. As designers, we tend not to work for companies. We tend to represent ourselves. So, the name of my business is technically called Becca Kessin. We represent ourselves. Give me that question one more time so I make sure I answer it correctly.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to talk about just the importance of networking in sound design.
Okay. So this is going to sound a tiny bit conceited, but it's true. I very rarely interview for jobs anymore. At this point, I have reached a point in my career where I am actually approached to design. This comes down to two things. It comes down to my network and it comes down to my previous work. If I were looking for a lighting designer and I go out and I find a lighting designer and I've been really blown away by her work for the last 10 shows I've seen, I would feel good about hiring that person. Likewise, if I was after a lighting designer and, went to a show where you couldn't see the face of anyone on stage and it clearly wasn't a creative choice, I probably wouldn't want to hire that person. So that's how you're building one level of network, what the audience sees. That's after opening night or after previews. The other network that you're building is your creative team. And that is, your director, your producers, the theater, if that's a separate producing entity, your fellow designers. I am very routinely recommended for work by directors I have previously worked with, by designers I have previously worked with, by producers. Let's say I did a great job on a show for a producer at one theater. They're producing something elsewhere. They might recommend me. So your network is going to grow every time you take a new show. The goal as an independent designer and, as a freelancer is to make sure you are proud of every piece of work you put out there. You want everyone to be able to see, hey, that sound design, Becca did that. Her name is on that. That is some good work. So pride in your work and effective work with your team is the other half of that network. And that's the sort of before you open end of it.
Definitely. Well, it sounds like you've worked your way up to this status, right? Of, you don't need to be interviewed, right? Like you find people find you for work, right? And therefore.
In theory, yeah, I will be very honest with you. Not this past year. None of us have been busy this past year. The nice thing about is, and yes, exactly right what you said, I worked my way up. When I was right out of school, I took every job that would pay me and a couple that didn't pay me because they were good opportunities. So students that are out there or soon to be graduates, take everything. Even if you don't want to be a lighting designer, if someone's going to pay you to run cable for 10 hours, take that job, take the money. You're going to meet people on that job. Maybe they're looking for a sound designer in future. So you should not be too proud to take any gig whatsoever. When I started, I was doing a lot of load-ins. I was doing some theme park work. If you've ever been to Halloween Horror Nights, I worked for the company that would load in all of those mazes, and I'd run mazes. I did a lot of A1 work where I was mixing. I did even more A2 work where I was a wireless technician. That is something I'm very good at. It's not my favorite thing to do, but I'm excellent at it. And so you can get reputations for good things. How I became a working designer was I got a reputation as a really good assistant. What would happen was other designers would double book themselves and need to be in tech for 2 shows at once, which happens a lot more often than you would think. Those designers would hire me. They would come to tech with me for a day or 2. And then I would sort of get the gist of where they were going with the design. They'd head out and I would finish the show while they weren't in the theater. So that was me acting as an assistant and then turning into something called an associate. An assistant assists. An associate can make creative choices for you when you're not in the space or not in the room. And that was how I really developed not only my reputation as a sound designer, but my skills as a sound designer. It was wonderful. I was getting a front row seat to looking at some of the best designers in LA and, elsewhere that were touring their shows in. And see their process and understand their process. So it was a really wonderful opportunity to me to not only support myself doing this work, but continue to learn and evolve how I worked as a designer. The next natural step from there is those designers I was an associate for, a director might try to hire them again. And they'd say, you know what, I'm really too busy, but here's Becca's number. And you recommend people when you are not available. I'm happy to say I'm now at the point, 15 years later, where I'm no longer having to necessarily take every single job just to pay my bills and just because I'm afraid to turn down every single opportunity. As I've gotten older, as I developed my career, I'm able to turn down the things that I'm not the best fit for, that I don't have time for, that I'm not interested in. And the best part is I'm able to recommend some of the younger folks that I work with or some of the newer career entries that I work with and put those people in the same position that was able to help me develop my career.
Yeah, it sounds like, work your way up, like you said, and then, just take as many gigs as possible as you learn and as you progress.
Mm-hmm. That and something I wish I'd known about when I was a student was don't be afraid to reach out to designers to shadow them. When I say to shadow someone, it generally means, can I follow you around all day if I'm really quiet? For sound designers, you have to be quiet. And this can work for anyone. Stage managers always have students shadowing them. It seems like any designer, any director, any production, anyone, if you think their job is interesting, and you want to learn more about it, don't be afraid to cold call people, email them, be polite, of course, but the worst they can say is no. And shadow that person for a day. I've had students, both of mine and students I hadn't met before who, got in touch and said, hey, can I, shadow you at South Coast Rep for the show? Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to get your foot in the door. First of all, you're learning, right? That's what you're there to do. You're getting free experience. You're trading your time for some experience. Now, when a student really impresses me in a shadow, I am very inclined to ask them for their email and their phone number. And I will probably try to hire them at some point. It's one of those things where I might ask for your card and then, 8 months later, I'll email you out of the blue saying, hey, it's Becca from that show you shadowed and I need another hand for a load-in. Are you available and interested? You really never know where those opportunities come from. And I just can't emphasize enough how much you are going to learn watching someone else design. When we're the designer in tech, we're in the hot seat, right? I'm in my tunnel vision. I'm in Qlab and I've got a director in an ear and I'm keeping an eye on the stage and I've got my paperwork over there. There's a lot going on and I can't necessarily step back and take a larger creative breath and thought and overall opinion on the day, right? I'm too close to it.
Yeah.
The person shadowing me can. And it makes it a wonderful opportunity. It's how you can explore shows that you're just not getting hired on yet.
Yeah, when I was first going to technical theater, I shadowed, right? Like, you like it depends, and that's how you learn. You do it. You're on the job, right? And you do this and do that, and everything you just said is perfect, and that's the way it works.
Yeah, and it should be noted that it's important to learn what you love, and it's just as important to learn what you don't like to do. Remember, I went to college thinking I would be an actor, only to realize I actually don't love the rehearsal process. That's not where my spirit lives. It's very valuable to know that. A lot of my college students will, we do quick intros on our first day of class, and they're saying, well, I might be a stage manager, or I might be a scenic designer, but I don't know yet. Good. That's exactly what you're here to learn. Students, you are still, I worked with someone who referred to his students as they're still cooking, right? You're still growing. You're still experiencing. You're not supposed to know everything yet because you're still in school. Also, spoiler alert, once you graduate, you are also not going to know everything yet. The world might think it is, but you're not going to. We're always learning. We're always growing. We're always changing our opinions, right? There are a lot of amazing sound designers who have become amazing projection designers or playwrights or producers, right? Just because this is what we're doing right now in time doesn't mean this is the only part of the creative field we will work in. So keep yourself open to evolving what you like and what you don't like. And of course, ideally in the middle is what you will get paid for.
Yeah. It's I would say it sounds like from my perspective of what you've told me is sound design is all about working your way up, and it there could be good and bad days, right? And that's just part of the job, and you learn to work with that.
I want to say, you say working your way up, and it's something that I work against. Like, to me, sound design is what I was after. Like, that was my goal.
Yeah, definitely.
We don't do this with cats in front of us. So I worked my way up to sound design, but I want to emphasize that isn't necessarily the top of the sound world. If there are a lot of people I know in professional sound who hate designing. They are amazing production audio engineers. They are phenomenal A1s. They are doing the stuff they think is the best, just the way I think I'm doing something that is the best.
Yeah.
I mean, a perfect world.
Exactly.
You're working with colleagues where everyone is really doing what they're passionate about. And Emmy that I work with, we were chatting and I asked her, I was like, do you get to design a lot? And she said, I never need to design again. That's fine by me. That's not fun for me. What I like is loading in the show, making sure everything works and getting it ready for tech, which to me is the least fun part of my job. It's the thing that I hate doing, but that's okay because it's not part of my purview directly as a sound designer every time. So there's a lot of jobs for a lot of different facets of what we're doing. There's no particular one job that's on top.
Okay, yeah, that makes, it's there are different levels. Oh, I don't know why I keep saying levels. I'm sorry. It's not, I think I'm interpreting this wrong. But it's all amazing work, and it's great.
Exactly. We are all a team. There is no one person. If you're watching the Tonys and you're watching, Kai Harada go get his Tony Award for sound design, good job, Kai, and he is a genius. However, there is an audio army behind every show. The bigger a show gets, the more people it takes to make it run.
Definitely. Well, that's great advice. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure talking to you about sound design and racking your brain.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was fantastic. For any students who are watching, feel free to email, get in touch, follow up with questions, or reach out to those sound designers in your world and shadow them.
Well, thank you so much, Becca. And thank you for tuning in to Tech Talk with Ethan, guys. See you next week.
My pleasure. Thanks. Bye, Ethan.